Exposed, she turned pain into power at her birthday, discovering a life-changing gift. Sarah Donovan stood on the brink of her 30th birthday, surrounded by the cramped walls of her childhood home in Elmwood, Nebraska. The weight of her father's legacy, a revered Vietnam War veteran, hung heavy, like a military jacket draped over her shoulders. Sarah felt the town's adoration for him, felt it carved into her skin and her heart like an indelible mark. But how could she possibly fill those shoes? With her brother Mark, the shining star of the family, basking in success, Sarah felt invisible, just a flickering candle in the brilliant glow of his flame. As she rummaged through the dusty attic that rainy afternoon, isolation wrapped around her. The old box caught her eye, a time capsule of faded letters. Heart pounding, she opened it to glimpse what her father had written home. Each letter felt like a door swinging open, words bursting with struggle, courage, and love. Tears stung her eyes as she read about the burdens he bore and the dreams he hoped to realize. "I fought for something greater," he once wrote. "Hope can change lives." With newfound inspiration, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite. She envisioned a community project to support struggling veterans, an initiative that would bring together their shared stories. But just as quickly, her dreams became marred by Mark's sarcastic voice. "You? Starting a charity? That's cute, sis." His laughter echoed in her mind, turning her courage into doubt. The emotional rift between them widened, leaving her grappling with instant humiliation and panic. Who was she to try and shine in the shadow of success? The days leading to her birthday morphed into a tightly wound coil of anticipation and anxiety. To her astonishment, her neighbors, hearing whispers of her plan, rallied around her. Suddenly they were sharing their own struggles, the scars they bore. The stories poured in, of sacrifices made, of veterans embraced, and of families lost and found. It lit something within her, a shared fire that grew hotter, more overwhelming. Sarah decided to host a fundraising event. She wanted her birthday to mark a new beginning, for herself and her community. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The day arrived. Sarah glanced at herself in the mirror, that flicker of hope now aflame. Her heart raced as she stood before her friends, neighbors, and family, the warmth of their presence wrapping around her. But there, in the shadows, her brother slinked in, arms crossed, and a sneer painting his face. The crowd quieted, tension thick like smoke. Sarah spoke, her voice shaky yet clear. "Today isn't just a celebration for me. It's a tribute to the unsung heroes among us." Just as she began to feel the power of her words, she locked eyes with Mark. The storm brewed within their gazes, a conflicted battle of love and resentment. Would she let fear take her voice, or would she rise in defiance? The answer hovered in the air, unanswered, as the weight of family, dreams, and stars began to collide. Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself amidst the tension. "This is a chance for us to come together," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "The heroes among us have stories that deserve to be heard. Today isn't about me, it's about honoring their sacrifices." The crowd started to murmur, a wave of support rippling through. She could see glimmers of hope lighting faces, and despite the difficult gaze of her brother, she pressed on. "Let's start a conversation that's been long overdue. I may not have all the answers, but together, we can listen, learn, and heal." As the audience began to engage, she could feel the warmth of their shared energy. The heaviness of doubt still gurgled in her stomach, but she could see her neighbors nodding, feeling the spark of community. Stories started to emerge, veterans stepping forward sharing tales of courage that brought chills to Sarah's skin. It was exactly what she had envisioned, the walls coming down, the silence shattered. Then gradually, she noticed Mark linger at the back. His expression had shifted, the sneer fading into a thoughtful line. Was he listening? Or was he merely waiting for a moment to strike again? "Sarah, you really think you can make a difference?" Mark interrupted. The crowd fell quiet, tension refilling the air like a taut string ready to snap. "You're just playing dress-up, acting like you're some sort of hero. You're not ready for this." Her heart thudded painfully, doubt creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. But she stood taller, eyes fierce. "I may not be equipped with medals or accolades, but I know how to care. I know how to support." The crowd gasped, many faces reflecting surprise and admiration. In that heart-stopping moment, Sarah felt the shove of untamed power as the warmth of their belief began to wrap around her, igniting a fire in her chest. Mark flinched, caught off guard by the collective energy of the room. Suddenly, the reality of his words spun dizzyingly. What if he was right? What if she wasn't ready? Those thoughts clawed at her confidence, dark and slippery like a fish escaping a net. "Just give her a chance, Mark," someone called from the crowd. "Let's see what she can do." Sarah looked around, encouragement blossoming in the faces of her friends. A few heads nodded in agreement, and she felt the tide overwhelming her brother's dismissive disbelief. Maybe this was the moment she could not just change her own life, but perhaps even his. Remnants of hope kindled from behind her ribcage, bursting forth as she locked her gaze on Mark. "I don't need to wear your shoes or live up to your standards. I'm here to forge my own path, one that serves others." A soft murmur of support rippled through the crowd, but Mark's expression tightened, frustration and skepticism challenging the warmth. "You'll fall flat, Sarah. Just wait and see." But as uncertainty loomed, Sarah felt the flicker of doubt inside her begin to shrink. She had faced worse storms, and within that moment, a profound realization settled in. Her brother's judgment could weigh heavy, but ultimately, it was her choices that shaped her destiny. With a sense of determination rising, she turned back to her audience, igniting the spark again. "We are the voices this town needs to hear. Together, we can build a legacy, not just for ourselves but for every hero who struggles to find their way home." Applause erupted, shaking away the last traces of despair. The connection was real. They were rallying together. Sarah smiled, exhilarated by the course of energy buzzing through the crowd. She refused to let anyone extinguish that light again. As she stepped down from the small makeshift stage, a rush of excited chatter swelled around her, incomprehensible yet heartwarming. Perhaps this community could be more than just a place. It could be a launching pad for their stories, their pain, and ultimately, their power. But just as she began to relax, a figure stepped through the crowd. With familiar features and an unmistakable determination, their eyes locked. Mark was approaching, and he had something serious to say. Sarah's heart raced, anxious yet curious. Could she truly prepare for whatever was coming next? Mark stepped closer, his posture tight, the tension around them palpable. Sarah could feel her pulse quicken. What was he going to say this time? She braced herself, hoping that the energy from the crowd could shield her from whatever he might unleash.
"You think you can just swoop in here and everything will change?" His voice was steady but laced with an edge. "You don't even know the half of it, Sarah. You can't fix everything with a few speeches." The cheerful atmosphere around them dimmed slightly, some laughter fading as people turned their attention to this unfolding confrontation. Sarah's heart plummeted. Did he really believe she was that naive? She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts.
"Mark, I don't expect to fix everything overnight. I know this will take time. But we have to start somewhere," she pleaded. "I want to give our community a voice, a space to share and heal." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "And what if those voices tell you things you don't want to hear? What if their pain is bigger than you ever imagined?" Her stomach knotted. He had a point. The weight of unspoken stories hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. She raked a hand through her hair, gathering her composure. "Then we listen. Honestly and openly," she replied, feeling the determination simmer deep inside her. "I can't promise I'll have all the answers, but I do know that silence is more damaging than anything." The crowd stirred with murmurs of agreement. Those who had just shared their stories seemed to ignite with newfound courage, nodding at her words. Sarah felt the warmth of their support wrap around her like a comforting blanket, urging her forward. Mark shrugged, the resolve in his eyes wavered for just a moment. And who's going to protect you from the backlash when they share their truths? Are you ready for that? There was a silence filled with tension as Sarah contemplated his question. The fear lurked in the back of her mind, gnawing away at her confidence. But was she really going to let it defeat her? Images of her neighbors, their struggles and triumphs, flashed in her mind. No, she couldn't allow fear to become a barrier. "I can't stand back and do nothing," she replied, her voice firm. "I want to help them find their strength. If I have to walk through the fire to get there, then I will." In that moment, Mark's expression softened slightly, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the weight of her words. "You're brave. I'll give you that. But bravery doesn't always mean winning." The crowd shifted, breaths held as they absorbed this exchange. Sarah could feel a swell of courage within her. Maybe it's not about winning, but about showing up, about holding the space for each other. As Mark contemplated her words, a soft buzz of agreement spread through the crowd. It was a small victory, but one that felt solid. "Let's show Mark what we can do," someone shouted from the back. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Sarah's heart soared. In that moment of exhilaration, she saw a glimmer in Mark's eyes, something shifting beneath the surface. Was it respect? Or maybe a hint of understanding? Before she could dwell on it, the crowd rallied behind her, fueled with hope. They were united in purpose, voices intertwined in a chorus of resilience. Sarah took a step back onto the makeshift stage, feeling the warmth of their energy wash over her, and could sense it. This was exactly what they needed. But just then, a piercing voice interrupted their moment of unity. "You may want to think twice about this, Sarah." It was someone from the back, their tone icy and dismissive. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Doubt surged again, but she squared her shoulders, determined. She needed to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. How could she truly lead if she didn't embrace the full spectrum of the truth? "Who's ready to share their story?" she called out, a fire igniting in her heart. The moment hung, charged with possibility, and as people shifted forward, one voice emerged, ready to break through the silence. What kind of story would she hear next? And how would it change everything? The moment stretched, like a tightrope poised over an uncertain depth. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the crowd, eyes darting to faces she recognized, each etched with a different kind of pain. When the first silhouette stepped into the light, all eyes turned. It was the woman from the community center, Ellie, a teacher admired for her kindness, yet burdened by unshared struggles. "Can I speak?" Ellie's voice trembled, but it carried a strength that demanded attention. "Yes." Sarah beamed at her, grateful for the courage taking shape before her. Here was the moment she'd hoped for, the beginning of their collective healing. With an encouraging nod, Ellie took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering. "I was afraid to come here today. I didn't want anyone to see my brokenness," she started, her voice steadying. "But then I realized something. I've spent so long hiding behind a smile. My sister, my best friend, passed away last year. I didn't know how to carry that weight." A hush fell over the crowd, as all the air seemed to retreat into the space between them, compressing the grief made unspoken until now. Sarah felt a knot of sorrow tighten in her throat, but also a fierce pride in Ellie's bravery. This was exactly the kind of moment they needed. "It hurt," Ellie continued, eyes glistening. "I thought I could just keep going, pretend like it didn't matter. But it did. It shaped me and the way I see the world." There was a collective inhale as her words sank in, scattering energy like a pebble cast into a still pond. Sarah could almost hear thoughts ricocheting through the crowd, memories surfacing, challenges acknowledged. Ellie pressed on. "At first I thought expressing my pain was a sign of weakness, but now I see it as a strength, a tool, and if I have to share my struggles to help even one person feel less alone, then I will." The crowd murmured their support, nodding vigorously, faces illuminated by the light of shared understanding. Sarah watched as others shifted in their seats, some wiping at tears, others leaning in closer. Ellie's story was becoming a lifeline. What I didn't expect was how much love would come pouring in, Ellie infused with warmth. Through my darkest days, friends reached out, and people I never thought would show up, did. It taught me that vulnerability connects us. It allows us to be stronger together. A ripple of applause broke out, spontaneous and insistent, as people began to recognize the potency of resilience. Sarah felt her heart expand, fueled by the electricity in the air. She stepped forward again, sensing the crowd's momentum. Thank you, Ellie. You just reminded us all that every piece of our story matters, even the painful ones. It's time for us to show that love back. The crowd erupted, clapping, cheering, voices mingling into one hopeful sound. As the applause simmered down, other hands began to raise in the crowd. I want to share too, called a voice from a familiar face, another neighbor whose secrets had always remained hidden. Sarah's stomach fluttered with excitement and dread. It was happening. Stories were breaking through the silence one by one, revealing the amazing strength woven through their community. But with each story shared, Sarah felt the shadow of doubt whispering once more. Would they all find the closure they sought? Would healing outweigh the pain? Just as another voice began to speak, a loud commotion erupted from the back of the crowd. A figure rushed in, flanked by worried faces. What's going on here? It was the town mayor, his eyes scanning the crowd, landing on Sarah with a mix of confusion and warning. The atmosphere shifted once again, the hope that had built beginning to crack. Sarah's heart raced as she locked eyes with the mayor. She sensed the challenge looming. Would the movement they started be derailed? What unexpected twist awaited them now? And would she have the strength to face it? The mayor's presence loomed like a dark cloud over the gathering, casting a shadow where hope had just blazed brightly. Sarah felt a chill sweep through her. She could see the worry on her neighbors' faces as they stiffened, the collective energy dampening. Would this be the end of their long-awaited catharsis? Excuse me, everyone, the mayor called out, his voice urgent, slicing through the tension. I need to remind you that this assembly is exactly what our community needs, Sarah interrupted, surprised by the surge of defiance rising in her chest. She stepped forward, the spotlight now split between her and Ellie, who remained rooted in place, her earlier courage flickering like a candle in the wind. We're sharing our stories here, our truths. Isn't that what we should be doing? Isn't that what you wanted when you encouraged unity among us? The crowd began to murmur again, the tide shifting back in their favor. The mayor frowned, one hand resting on the podium, his eyes narrowing. I'm aware of what you're doing, but I need to remind you that there are protocols. There are guidelines to follow. Sarah nodded, feeling adrenaline rush through her veins. I understand, but if we're not allowed to speak about our pain, how can we ever heal? A flicker of hesitation crossed the mayor's face. The air felt thick with a blend of anxious energy and flickering hope. Sarah could see the connection growing between her and the crowd. I lost my son a year ago, another voice broke through, soft yet firm. It was the woman from the corner who rarely spoke, her voice shaky but resolute. And no one told me it was okay to grieve, or to say that I'm not okay. Gasps mingled with quiet whispers of support. Exactly, Sarah encouraged, now feeling energized by this solidarity. How many families are out there, silenced by the weight of unshared suffering? How many neighbors are afraid to be seen, thinking they have to hide their struggles behind smiles? The mayor's expression shifted slightly as he glanced at the faces around him. The waves of emotions began to ripple among the crowd, and the murmurs turned into a chorus of agreement. Slowly, he started to retract the wall he'd erected. I see your point, he finally said, but his voice was still laced with caution. However, I just want to ensure that this doesn't escalate into chaos. People coming together to share their pain is not chaos, Sarah replied, her heartbeat steadying. It's community, it's love, it's real. More hands shot up, eager to share, to reveal their truths, and Sarah felt a warmth blossom in her chest as each voice took its turn. The stories flowed, gliding over the wounds, turns raw and healing. Each narrative a gift, wrapped in vulnerability yet brimming with strength. But still, there lingered a sense of uncertainty in the air. They were teetering on the edge of something beautiful yet fragile. Could it really withstand the scrutiny that was sure to follow once the mayor returned home to think about this gathering? What if their healing ignited a fire that couldn't be put out? Just as another story unfolded, the mayor shifted slightly, his expression unreadable. "Let's discuss this," he said, softening slightly. "Perhaps it's time to reevaluate how we balance guidelines with the needs of this community." Those words hung in the air, a glimmer of hope mixed with the unknown. Could this actually work? Could all their stories lead to real change? As more tales wove together, Sarah felt a thread of excitement surge through her, but also a hum of uncertainty. She knew the path they were carving out, one of honesty and redemption, also held a risk. What might be lost in the pursuit of healing? As the evening wore on, she glanced at the mayor again, who stood just beside her, an intricate part of their journey now. Would he truly support them? Or was there a hidden agenda behind those cautious words? The answers waited in the air, poised like an arrow ready to be released. And the deeper the stories flowed, the more Sarah could almost taste the change on the horizon. As the night deepened, the atmosphere in the gathering shifted from tension to something richer, an undercurrent of collective resilience. Each story that emerged wove tighter the fabric of their community. Sarah could see her neighbors share glances, some nodding in agreement, others wiping away tears. It felt like a weight being lifted, a weight that had pressed down on them for far too long. Another voice broke free from the crowd. "I never knew my brother struggled until it was too late." The man's hands trembled as he spoke, generating a hush that fell like snow upon the gathering. "I thought he was fine. Moved on, you know. It wasn't until I heard them say he'd sought help too late that I realized how important it was to talk." A ripple of murmurs spread. The crowd leaned in, each word striking a chord. Sarah watched, her heart swelling with empathy. They were shedding shame and silence like old skin, revealing raw, tender truths. Feeling emboldened, Ellie finally stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "I thought if I kept quiet it would protect my family. But now I see being silent doesn't shield us." Her eyes glistened with tears, but a smile flickered across her face. "We need to tear down these walls, piece by piece." There was a palpable shift in the air. It was no longer just Sarah leading this charge. Ellie possessed the courage to join in, and it breathed new life into the assembly. The mayor shifted uneasily at the podium, his brow furrowing deeper with each resonant story. "I'm glad to hear these narratives," he said, but a hint of defensive tone edged back in. "But we do have to worry about extreme emotions leading to division. How can we ensure this doesn't outgrow its boundaries?" Sarah took a step forward, channeling the growing spirit of the crowd. "But what if these stories don't divide us?" she countered passionately. "What if they connect us in ways we never imagined? We're all feeling pain, loss, fear. Why should we hide that?" As she spoke, a slow ripple of agreement washed over the crowd. Hands reached out, affirming what they felt together. Sarah could see it. The cracks in their silent walls were widening, perhaps enough to let the light in. "Maybe it's about understanding the breadth of our experiences," someone else interjected, voice rising with urgency. "We can create a safe space. What if we establish community circles? Regular meetings where we can gather, share, and heal together." Excitement crackled like electricity as more voices chimed in, each idea building upon the last. A wellspring of solutions began to emerge, mending the phrase the mayor feared would lead to chaos. But just as enthusiasm surged, doubt nipped at the edges of Sarah's mind. Will he get behind this? She wondered. Would this newfound unity spark real change with the mayor's blessing? Or would it all fall apart when scrutiny set in? As if sensing her turmoil, Ellie caught her eye. "Whatever happens next, Sarah, I believe we're on the right path together," she said, her voice both soft and strong. The crowd's vibrancy ignited Sarah's confidence, yet a seed of anxiety rooted deep within her. Could they ensure this momentum didn't falter? The mayor cleared his throat. "Let me think about how we can facilitate these meetings. Yes. But I do worry about the necessary regulations to maintain order. His words hung in the air, a reminder that the balance was fragile. Just then, a woman's gentle laugh rang out, unexpected but brightening the atmosphere. Order. Isn't that what we've been missing? We need a bit of chaos when it comes to healing. Laughter echoed in the gathering, shaking off their lingering reservations. Sarah couldn't help but join in. In that moment, hope sprung anew. They were not just fighting against something, they were fighting for something, collectively flipping the narrative from despair to possibility. But as Sarah soaked in this newfound energy, she couldn't shake the feeling of an inevitable storm lurking on the horizon. Would the mayor's ambivalence transform into support, or would it twist back into something darker? The night was still young, but the questions began to swirl in her mind. What would the next steps reveal for all of them? The laughter faded, replaced by an almost electric anticipation. Sarah could sense that everyone together was teetering on the edge of something transformative. There was a shift, a collective inhale, as they awaited the mayor's response. Would he stay on the sidelines, or would he step into the arena? The mayor adjusted his glasses, peering out at faces that once hung heavy with despair, now lit by courage and determination. All right, let's propose this to the city council, he finally said, a hint of resolve creeping into his voice. You'll have my support if we do this the right way. Relief washed over Sarah, and the crowd erupted with applause and cheers. Some clasped each other's shoulders, while others jumped with joy. In that moment, they were no longer just neighbors, they were allies, a tapestry of shared experiences and stories woven tightly together. It was astonishing how a single declaration could lift their spirits so high. But as the cheers settled, Sarah noticed Ellie staring up at the mayor with a mix of hope and uncertainty. The glow of the moment began to dim slightly, and Sarah could feel the weight of Ellie's unspoken fears. What if it's not enough? Ellie's eyes seemed to say as they flicked back to Sarah. In spite of the dawn of excitement, Sarah couldn't ignore her friend's apprehensions. It's a start, she whispered, squeezing Ellie's hand, grounding her in the moment. We just need to keep pushing. The crowd began to disperse, their conversations bubbling about when the first meeting would happen, and who would facilitate. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the energy, by the tangible hope hanging in the air. She glanced at the mayor again, his face softening as he spoke to a small group gathered around him. Was this the beginning of a true partnership? But doubts lingered. What kind of regulations would the council impose? Would they stifle the growth of their newfound connection? As if reading her mind, Ellie leaned closer. We can't let fear silence us now, she said, her voice steady. We've opened the door to healing. It's up to us to keep it that way no matter what. Later that evening, Sarah found herself back home, tapping her fingers nervously on the table. She replayed the events of the night over and over. Hope blossomed inside her, but shadows of anxiety curled in the corners of her mind. How could they protect this movement from becoming just another bureaucratic endeavor? With a sigh, she opened her laptop. She needed a plan, a way to turn this momentum into something unstoppable. She imagined flyers for the first community circle, headlines buzzing with anticipation, her neighbors rallying around it like wildfire. But uncertainty gnawed at her. She closed her eyes, briefly allowing herself to envision each story from the gathering. Each voice mattered. They would not fall back into silence. Driven by newfound energy, she began drafting different ideas, but a nagging thought pulled her from her focus. What would happen when they finally met again? Would the city council embrace their stories and support their vision? Or would their gatherings be crushed under rules fashioned to keep them in line? Just then, the phone buzzed beside her, breaking the tension. It was a text from Ellie. Thinking of calling a few more people to gather their stories. Want to join? A smile broke on Sarah's face. Yes, yes. This was the spirit they'd need to carry their mission forward. But was she ready to dive deeper, risking her heart once more to create something lasting? With determination, Sarah replied, I'm in. Let's make this bigger. As she hit send, an uneasy feeling fluttered in her stomach, a realization that this journey was only beginning. They were stepping into the unknown, where voices mingled in harmony, but also where shadows of doubt could easily creep back in. Tomorrow would be crucial. Would they summon the courage to speak up again and gather more stories? Or would uncertainty keep them frozen? The moment of truth awaited them, and Sarah knew they had to face it head-on. What would they discover when they started to pull back the layers once again? The next morning felt different. The sun streamed through Sarah's window, warming her face like a promise of a fresh start. She glanced at her phone. It was still early, but the notifications beckoned her. Though the time to meet with Ellie and others loomed closer, she felt the familiar tug of anxiety pooling in her stomach. Taking a deep breath, she read through the messages. Ellie had rallied a couple of other neighbors, Laura, whose laughing spirit had always lightened the heaviest moments, and Marcus, the high school teacher renowned for his engaging storytelling. They planned to meet at the small park after lunch. Each message ignited excitement, yet the weight of responsibility pressed on her. A mix of exhilaration and dread, blending into a cocktail of emotions. What if their words weren't powerful enough? What if the council couldn't see the value in their stories? Pushing those thoughts aside, Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee and prepared for the day ahead. The park buzzed with life. Children played in the distance and the warm breeze whispered through the trees. Sarah found Ellie, Laura, and Marcus sitting on a weathered picnic bench, sketches of ideas lit across their faces. "Hey, you made it!" Ellie's smile widened, and the fear from their last meeting seemed to dissipate in the air between them. "Couldn't miss the chance to brainstorm," Sarah replied, trying to mirror the enthusiasm. They huddled together, exchanging ideas, their words tumbling over one another like a lively conversation. "I think we should focus on what our community really needs," Marcus suggested, his brow furrowing slightly, deep in thought. "What changes would actually matter to us?" Laura interjected. "Maybe we should share our own stories first. People respond to personal connections, right? If we can speak from our hearts, it might resonate." Sarah felt her heart race. Sharing their personal stories, wasn't that precisely what had brought them all here? Yes, our experiences can weave a narrative that's hard to ignore. Excitement surged through the group as they pooled together, discussing how best to present themselves without fear. Each person spoke, a heavy tale of loss, a story of triumph, the struggles carving shapes into who they were today. As they gathered these scattered pieces of their lives, Sarah realized something remarkable. Each story was a thread, connecting them and pulling them away from the loneliness of their paths. They weren't just fighting for a cause, they were reclaiming their identities, their truths. That evening, while the others shared their stories, a sense of urgency pressed into Sarah. As she listened, she felt the raw honesty tugging at her own heartstrings. When it was her turn, she took a moment to collect her thoughts. The memories flooded back, the challenges faced, the darkness that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. With a shaky breath, she began to speak about her journey, about how she had lost hope but slowly pieced herself back together by finding community. When the last story was shared, a heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the deep mutual understanding of their shared pain. Tears glistened in Ellie's eyes, while Marcus nodded in solidarity. "Looks like we have something powerful here," Laura said softly, a grin spreading across her face. But as the glow of connection enveloped them, anxiety bubbled to the surface again. Sarah hesitated, fidgeting with her hands. "Will it be enough? What if we're dismissed?" Ellie placed her hands on Sarah's, grounding her. "What matters is that we show up. We're already changing, that's powerful. You've turned your pain into strength, and that's what we'll share. Let's not get lost in fear." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, a fragile hope bloomed amidst lingering fears. This moment was only the beginning, but as they all sat together, a question resonated deeply. How would they channel these stories into action that the council could not ignore? Tomorrow brought the council meeting. Would their courage ignite change, or would they find themselves silenced once again? The day of reckoning dawned with a quiet intensity. Sarah awoke before her alarm, the sun's golden light trickling through her curtains like a whispered encouragement. Today was it. The council meeting hung over her like a storm cloud. She dressed slowly, nerves bubbling in her stomach. Each piece of clothing felt like armor against the judgment of the council, the community, and herself. In the mirror, she practiced her speech, her eyes searching for confidence in the reflection. "You've got this," she whispered, hoping the words would manifest into reality. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A group message from Ellie brightened her morning. "Meet at the cafe before the meeting? A little caffeine boost might help." At the cafe, they gathered around a small table, steaming mugs warming their hands. The chatter of other customers buzzed in the background, blending with the aroma of fresh coffee. Sarah glanced around, taking in the comforting atmosphere, yet the knots in her stomach tightened as she remembered why they were there. "Okay, let's go over our points again," Ellie suggested, her voice steady and reassuring. They aired their prepared statements, each sharing their unique angles with fervor. Marcus was short and impactful, bringing the voice of the teacher. Laura infused humor, recalling moments of levity during tough times. Sarah felt the pressure build, but reminded herself there was power in their shared experience. "Remember," Laura said, eyes sparkling, "we're telling our truth. No one can argue with that." As the meeting hour approached, Sarah felt her heart pound harder. If she was being honest, the fear of being dismissed sat heavy on her chest. What if they were just wasting their time? But Ellie's earlier words echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about what happened today. It was about what they'd become through this process. They left the cafe. Each step toward the council building echoed like a drumbeat of their collective heartbeat. Fast, nervous, and alive. Inside, the atmosphere was sterile and intimidating. Rows of chairs faced a raised platform where the council members sat, stoic and unyielding. The weight of their presence pushed against Sarah's chest. They shuffled into the room, finding seats among the other observers. As the meeting commenced, Sarah felt a swell of energy rise from their group. They shared glances, silently reminding one another of their purpose. The council began to present stale reports on budgets and projects, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. Their stories were far more potent than numbers on a page. Finally, the time came for them to take the stand. Sarah's hand shook as she gripped the lectern. With one last deep breath, she stepped forward, looking out into the sea of unfamiliar faces. "I stand here with my friends and neighbors because we're not just statistics, we're people. Our stories," her voice wavered but she steadied herself, "our stories connect us." As she shared her narrative, she felt the collective energy shift in the room. She recounted her journey, the struggle, the pain, and the healing that came through community, through shared experiences. The council members' eyes flickered with interest. She noticed a few leaning in closer, almost instinctively captivated. When she finished, the silence felt electric. A moment stretched painfully long before Ellie stepped up next. "We're not asking for much," she said, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. "Just a chance to ensure our voices matter. We need your support to create a community that thrives, not just survives." One by one, her friends stepped forward, bearing their souls, turning their pain into power. Each story came to life, bursting out against the walls of indifference, leaving the council no choice but to listen. But just as the atmosphere began to shift, Sarah caught a glimpse of a council member whispering to another, their expressions clouded with doubt. Panic surged within her. Did they really see the value in what they were sharing, or was their vulnerability set to be dismissed? The final speaker, a newcomer from the audience, stood abruptly. "I know it's uncomfortable to hear us like this," they said, their voice resolute. "But this isn't just about today. It's about the future we're going to build." Hope sparked in the air around them like electricity, but doubt still lingered. Would they truly be heard? As they left the meeting room, uncertainty sat heavy in Sarah's heart. They had laid bare their truths, shown the power of vulnerability, but the looming question echoed louder than ever. Would the council respond in kind? Or was this just the beginning of another uphill battle? The following day felt different. A cool breeze swept through Elmwood, carrying with it a sense of anticipation. Sarah woke early, the sun streaming in as she pulled herself from bed, determination burning in her chest. Last night had been a roller coaster of emotions, a moment filled with both vulnerability and power. She could still see the council members' skeptical faces, the weight of their indifference pushing against every heartfelt story shared. Yet beneath that doubt, a flicker of hope resided. Today, they would begin to chart their course forward. They'd gathered support from the community, woven their experiences together, and collectively demanded to be heard. Now, Sarah needed to harness that energy to ensure their voices would not only be acknowledged, but also acted upon. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly opened a message from Ellie. Community circle at the park after lunch, more stories to share, and maybe some new friends? A wave of warmth washed over her. This was it. They were expanding, welcoming others into the healing fold. What had started as a small vision was blooming into something beautiful and far-reaching. She quickly replied, "I'm in. Let's make this big." As the day went by, excitement intertwined with anxiety. Thoughts raced through Sarah's mind. Would the others show up? Would they feel welcome and safe enough to share? The anticipation held her captive throughout the morning. When Sarah arrived at the park, she was taken aback. The turnout exceeded her expectations. Families, veterans, and brand new faces filled the grassy area. Children played nearby while their parents congregated, eyes filled with curiosity. This was a community that sought connection, a community eager to embrace the light of shared truth. Ellie and Laura greeted her with wide smiles, setting an infectious tone. "Look around, Sarah. People want to talk," Laura exclaimed, pointing to a small group gathering near the picnic benches. Sarah felt a rush of exhilaration as she stepped toward the crowd, noticing the familiar faces of those who had shared their stories at the council meeting, mingling with fresh new ones. She saw the mayor in the background, his posture shifting from skepticism to reluctant engagement. A hush fell over the people, curiosity drawing them closer as Sarah gently took the lead. "Thank you for coming today. Each of you holds a unique piece of our community's story. Together, we can create a tapestry of voices that not only reflects our struggles, but also illuminates our strength." "I thought I was the only one," a voice piped up from the crowd, filling the space with a collective vulnerability. "But I see faces just like mine." Warmth enveloped Sarah, a radiant wave that surged through her chest. This was what it meant to heal, to acknowledge pain but also to support one another through it. People began to step forward, filling the air with their narratives, the challenges they faced, the victories they had celebrated, and the love they longed to share. Each story was a brushstroke on a canvas, all different but united in purpose. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow around them, Sarah felt lighter, her heart swelling with pride at the courage blooming before her. They transcended their individual struggles. It was no longer just about her or the council. This was a movement about community. Later, as the flickering orange hues settled into twilight, a small child approached Sarah, eyes wide and sincere. "Are you a hero?" Her heart swelled at the question, and in that moment she realized this was more than a birthday project or a fleeting initiative. This was a movement, a way of life where every voice mattered, each shared story a stepping stone toward collective healing. "No," Sarah said gently, kneeling down to the child's level. "I'm just someone who wants to help others tell their stories. And so are all these amazing people." In the fading light, she glanced around at the crowd, filled with hope and connection. They were all heroes in their own right, sharing courage, fighting silence, reaching for understanding. As laughter and stories mingled in the air, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and purpose. They had built something special together, something that refused to be silenced. In the following weeks, the community circle grew beyond their wildest dreams, nurturing stories and connections, creating outreach programs for veterans, support systems for families, and igniting changes within the town. They had become the change they sought. One by one, people from Elmwood put their trust in her vision, and the council soon came to recognize this burgeoning movement as real, meaningful, and necessary. Decisions began tumbling into place, policies shifted, and support poured in as the mayor acknowledged the value of their engagement. This was the ripple effect of vulnerability turned to empowerment. As they stood together, looking down the road at the future blossoming ahead, Sarah realized they had transformed pain into power, and that power would only continue to grow, fueled by love and connection. Today, she had learned to embrace her story, to share it boldly, and to wear it with pride. And now, dear viewer, this is the moment you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss our next exclusive stories that inspire and connect. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help this community grow. Comment below your feelings about this powerful ending and what it means to you. And for the love of all things uplifting, share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformation. We're all in this together, and your support means everything. Don't wait, not even one more second, to share. The ripple of change starts with you.